follow-up email from myself directly, and that will include a recording of this webinar. So you can either watch it again or you can forward it on to anybody else in your organization who may get benefit out of this. I'm going to turn my camera on here just for a minute so I can introduce myself. My name is Erica, and thank you so much for joining me today for this webinar. We can expect this presentation to last about 20 to 30 minutes, kind of depending on the amount of questions that we get at the end. So I've blocked off plenty of time at the very end where we can either share questions through the chat box or you can actually ask them directly, and I'll be happy to answer those for you. So with that being said, let me go ahead and I'm going to turn my camera off again just to make sure we get a good connection for the screen share portion of this. But before we dive into the live demo, I actually have a short presentation put together that I would like to share with you all just to kind of set the stage and help us understand what we're going to be looking at today. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start this presentation. Okay, perfect. So at this point, you all should be able to see my screen and hopefully you're able to hear me okay. If for whatever reason during this presentation you feel like there's technical issues, you can't hear me or you can't see something, just go ahead and drop a chat into the comment box and I'll keep an eye on that because I want to make sure that everybody's able to see and hear everything during this presentation. All right, so for today's webinar, we are looking at how small businesses are reaching their full potential with Priority Matrix. Priority Matrix is designed for the small business owner and employee who wears lots of hats with constantly changing priorities and a high number, or rather increasing number, of incoming emails. Working in a small business myself, I can definitely relate to the feeling of, number one, wearing a lot of hats and just kind of having a lot on your plate. And with that being said, all of those priorities are, realistically constantly changing. So for the small business who doesn't really have a good software or situation in place to help their employees and leaders manage all of these priorities, changing priorities, and an increasing number of incoming emails, it can absolutely be challenging to make sure deadlines aren't being missed, hit those deadlines on time, and have a clear way for communication. Priority Matrix is here to support those employees and leaders who want better communication, leaders that strive for improved visibility, and owners that need automated processes to keep the business running at kind of the pace that it's going at. So as a small business, likely the goal is to continue growing. And with that being said, in my opinion, just from working with so many small businesses who pick up Priority Matrix, getting a system in place kind of right off the bat is definitely the most effective way to go about it, because you can imagine, and when I say small business, I'm meaning anything between 10 employees to 100 employees. And I've worked with a fair amount of organizations with 100 employees that roll out Priority Matrix and start to use it as pretty much their one central system for collaborating and prioritizing. And I've seen them succeed in ways that honestly I could never imagine seeing until I was able to work with them firsthand. With that being said, I also love to have the opportunity to connect with leaders and company owners who have a vision for their company and they're looking to get a system in place before they onboard all of their employees. The reason that this process can be so helpful to have in place is because then when a new employee is onboarded, the ground rules are kind of there and it's understood that Priority Matrix is indeed that central space for collaborating. So when the company grows, you have the streamlined process, this kind of standardized understanding of where that communication and prioritizing is happening. So how does the Priority Matrix approach support small businesses? Our approach offers an effective and visual approach to managing priorities that surfaces contextually relevant information while users are in meetings, responding to emails, or focusing on projects. Like so many companies over the past several years, and when I say so many companies, I mean essentially everybody that I talk to these days. You're likely using the Office ecosystem more than ever. Maybe you're in the process of rolling it out, or maybe it was adopted when everybody was essentially sent home and organizations needed a central space for communicating. Priority Matrix is 100% integrated with these Office 365 applications, such as Microsoft Teams and Outlook 365. But something so unique about Priority Matrix is that you're actually still able to collaborate externally without barriers. So, what I mean by that is you're going to be able to work with number one, people outside of your direct team or your direct department. And number two, kind of more importantly, you're going to be able to collaborate with people outside of the organization entirely. This is really unique to Priority Matrix because, believe it or not, some of the best project management tools out there do not allow people to work beyond their department, or, you know, given that, they can't even collaborate with people outside of the organization. And that's kind of crazy, in my opinion, because a lot of important collaboration happens jumping between team to team or working with your clients and external collaborators. So while we do integrate with Office, there's not going to be any barriers in terms of collaborating externally. If this is something that piques your interest, let me know and we can touch on this a little bit more at the end of the presentation. So what are we going to look at today during the actual live demo portion of this presentation? For today's presentation, I'm going to be touching on the best practices for small businesses using Priority Matrix. And what those best practices include are streamlining recurring processes, how you can manage recurring tasks effortlessly, increase visibility to align priorities, and how Priority Matrix will help you have effective and focused meetings. So those are some of the 4 best practices in Priority Matrix for small businesses, and I'm going to break every single one of them down and give you an example directly through the Priority Matrix application. So with that being said, let's go ahead and I'm going to move this over here. Let's take a look at the live Priority Matrix application. So right now you all should be able to see my Priority Matrix, and I have it directly integrated into Microsoft Teams. So as I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, over the past couple of years, the biggest request that we got was the fact that people needed Priority Matrix to run 100% through Teams. And now, when I talk to new organizations exploring Priority Matrix, it's absolutely one of their first credentials. And without this integration, we wouldn't be able to support the organizations that we do. So we're definitely super happy and proud of the fact of how well Priority Matrix integrates into the Office apps. So if you haven't had the chance to do this yet, you can install Priority Matrix just by going down to your apps option in the bottom left corner. Click on that, search for Priority Matrix, and then always pin this open. And that's going to allow you to surf through your Teams application, and Priority Matrix isn't going to go anywhere, so it's going to be super easy for you to access. So for those of you who are seeing Priority Matrix for the very first time today, I want to help you understand just some of the basics of kind of the general concepts of what we're looking at here. So in the middle of my screen, this is my full Priority Matrix app that I have pulled up here. I like to highlight the fact that I'm on the My Projects tab, and then I clicked on these 4 quadrants here. So this is going to become that central space where maybe you're working with your executives, maybe you're working with your teammates specifically, or maybe the organization allows for a lot of visibility and these projects are essentially shared with everybody. Priority Matrix, it creates a central space where you're able to track your own priorities, have visibility to see what your teammates are working on, and also delegate tasks out and communicate to each other as well. So anything under the sun when you think of team collaboration can likely be done in Priority Matrix. These projects can be shared with nobody, they can be shared with the entire organization, or you can pick and choose user by user who needs to see which project. I like to highlight that fact because in small businesses, sometimes there's individual contributors that don't necessarily need to share projects with everybody on the team. So keep in mind you're welcome to keep these projects private for as long as you need. So the first best practice that I would like to go over for people using a priority matrix at small businesses is the concept of standardizing recurring processes by using customized templates. An example that I like to use is onboarding because I know that that's relatable for small businesses because likely they're growing and they're constantly adding more employees. So we're going to go ahead and use this as our example today. So again, what we're looking at here is the concept of creating customized templates. So this is a template that I actually set up myself simply by creating a new project, adding a title that makes sense for this process, and actually adding all of those action items that need to take place every single time we onboard a new employee for this example. You can even go in and you can delegate tasks to people on your team, depending on who's responsible for that portion of onboarding. You can add deadlines, and then what you'll be able to do is you can save this project as a template. Go ahead and create as many templates as you need to fully cover all of the recurring processes that are happening in your company. What happens when you're able to use templates is you save so much time. You no longer have to continuously create the same project over and over. You can share these templates with your teammates to create a type of standardization. And then what happens is these templates generate reports for you. So, as a leader in the organization, you're able to compare onboarding or a sales process or invoicing, whatever it might be. When these templates are exactly the same, it creates standard metrics to review in the automatically generated reports. In order to access these templates that you've created and customized, when you go to add project, rather than doing a blank project, which would basically be creating a project from scratch, you will go to My Templates. These are templates that you've created and saved, or your teammates have created, saved, and shared with you. Alternatively, if you're not quite ready to create your own templates, we do have this tab which is called Public Templates. And these are templates that we have created to help you get started to have a centralized place with kind of the standardized processes that may be recurring. So feel free to explore these and import them as needed to help you get started seamlessly. Hopefully that makes sense. At this point, if you have any questions about using templates, write those down and I would love to touch on them again at the very end of this presentation. In terms of recurring processes, another thing that typically comes up is how do I set a recurring deadline for, tasks that happen over and over again? So I'm going to open up this one, which talks about managing login credentials. Again, as a small business employee, owner, or leader, we are all likely wearing a lot of different hats, and being able to automate these processes of having recurring tasks can take a huge load off of our employees because these are just manual things that don't need to be done every single day manually. And when we can use these automated processes that Priority Matrix offers, it's going to save you time and help you focus on everything else that you need to get done with a lot on your plate every single day. When you set up a new task, we'll use this one, make sure no error codes show up for users. You can go to the right-hand side and you're able to set your deadline. So it looks like this deadline was set for March 1st. And at the bottom where it says recurrence, you're able to choose how frequently this task needs to be reoccurring. What happens with a recurring task? We'll see here, I'm going to mark this item as completed. In other words, I'm saying, okay, I've already done this for the month. Give this just a moment, and this task is actually going to pop directly back up into the project. So again, and it's going to have the new deadline in place, which would be April 1st, since I said this to be recurring monthly. This is an amazing option for those of you who have maybe a weekly, monthly, quarterly, or even annually process that you need these types of reminders to come up in your priority matrix, but you don't want to have to go recreate the task every single time. Another thing that I would like to show you is the option for setting recurring reminders. Again, small business owners, leaders, and employees have a lot on their plate, and having these gentle reminders can be super helpful for everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and add somebody else to this task, saying, okay, now we're working together on this. And then I'm going to say, remind everybody daily until complete. What I did is I used a conversation command. These are all commands that you can use to update this task. You can always use the interface as well, but I think that the reminders are super easy to set by using the commands. So what I've done is I set a reminder for everybody on this item every single day until we complete this item. Or I could say, remind me in 4 hours. There's a lot of different reminders you can set for yourself, but again, small businesses, these people have a lot on their plate. So these gentle nudges to remind people what they need to be working on can really be make it or break it for the small businesses using Priority Matrix. So those two best practices kind of go hand in hand, which is standardizing it and taking away the manual work of recurring projects, processes, and recurring tasks by using templates and recurring deadlines and reminders. The second best practice, which I would like to show you, is the option to give kind of a high level of visibility for those people using Priority Matrix with their teammates. I want to take you to the search view, which is most commonly used by managers and leaders in the organization who need to make sure that their teammates are not letting items slip through the cracks. Again, working in a small business, we have so much on our plate and it can be pretty overwhelming, and we're only human. We make mistakes, and sometimes things do get forgotten about or they slip through the cracks. Priority matrix absolutely makes sure that happens less frequently, but from a management perspective, you're going to get the visibility you need from the search view. This is going to show you everything in your priority matrix across the board. And then what you're able to do is you can decide which teammate you need to zero in on. So now what I've done is I'm filtering items that I'm only responsible for, and I can see these based off of my upcoming deadlines. And then I can see overdue items as well. So without priority matrix, leaders in small businesses often rely on Excel spreadsheets, emails, constant meetings. But with all of those kind of, and I think of them as little octopus arms reaching out in all these different directions, there's no central space to see everything that their teammates are working on until you use priority matrix. Then that challenge is diminished because you can see everything in one place and you have that visibility that you need. Another view that stands out a whole lot to small businesses is the My Team view. What happens here is this allows managers to understand where people on their team are spending their time. So it breaks it down based off of recent activity for everybody in the organization that's using Priority Matrix. So that's going to be, if you will, kind of best practice number 3, going after templates, recurring deadlines, and then using priority matrix for the visibility you need. So you don't have to waste time juggling multiple platforms, having unnecessary meetings, and kind of wasting time throughout the day because you're going to have everything you need in just this one central space. Another thing I would like to add on to kind of the concept of visibility, then we'll move on to meetings, and then we'll finally get around to the Q&A. What I like to show people is the idea of creating a dashboard project. The reason that this is helpful for small businesses is because, again, everybody has a lot on their plate. There's likely a whole lot of projects created in Priority Matrix, and giving leadership a space where they can get the levels of visibility they need is really helpful. So I'm going to apply a filter here, and we're going to call it IT. So now what we've done is we filtered to only see IT related projects. in our priority matrix. What this dashboard view allows leaders to do is say, okay, here's everything that our business is working on related to IT, and these are actual project names. So when I click on this link on the right-hand side, it's going to redirect me to that project. So what this allows leadership to do in a small business is either stay at the high level and get project level updates, review those, and move on to the next thing. Because as we all know, when you have a lot on your plate, there's simply not enough time in the day. If you do have that bandwidth and you want to drill down to see the action items in each IT project, you can absolutely get that visibility and super easily just by clicking on that link. So that's going to be best practice number 4 is utilizing visibility and priority matrix. And not only this, but creating those dashboard projects to stay organized and have different levels of visibility that you need. Last but definitely not least is the concept of helping small businesses have short and effective meetings. Granted, those meetings are not going to go away. We're still going to have them every single day, but we might as well make them short, effective, and to the point. So again, we can kind of get back to work and continue working on what's necessary for the organization. With that being said, that's going to bring me to what I want to show you, which is the one-on-one view. So what happens here as an owner of a small business, you're likely checking in on the majority of your employees with either a weekly one-on-one meeting, monthly, or maybe it only needs to be quarterly if you're using Priority Matrix. But in order to ensure you have a short and effective one-on-one meeting, when you use this Priority Matrix feature, the system automatically creates a shared priority list between yourself and this one person that's in this meeting with you. Here we can review all of our shared priorities. We would be able to see all of our shared emails at the bottom here coming from your SharePoint. And most importantly, in my opinion, is you can add a new shared task. So we'll just say review HR documents, and we'll say this is going to be due in 7 hours. I can create this new task. It's automatically shared between the two of us. I can prioritize it. We could add item notes as needed. And when we hit add, this new priority will now be added to our one-on-one view, which is again incredibly helpful because after the meeting, the owner or manager feels confident that everything was tracked. The person working on these tasks does not have to spend time jotting things down after the meeting. Everything is prioritized and we're all good to go on the same page. So nothing is slipping through the cracks. All right, so bringing my presentation back to center stage here, I'd like to wrap this up with a quick little overview for everybody. And then what we can do is actually open up the floor for a discussion and we can kind of go over those Q&As that you might have. So overall, Priority Matrix helps small businesses increase visibility, have better communication, more effective meetings, and overall helping you focus and work on what are ultimately the highest priorities without letting anything slip through the cracks. I've worked with dozens of small businesses, again, probably around the 100 user mark. And in my opinion, this is a really sweet spot for Priority Matrix. What I'm able to do at that level is I can connect with groups of people, management, different teams, those kind of super users that want to know everything about Priority Matrix. I have that bandwidth to work really closely with those organizations. And at times, we've actually been able to do a little bit of customization work in Priority Matrix, whether it's with reports, different functionalities that are make it or break it for them. But I love working with the small business organizations. And if this kind of speaks to you and you think Priority Matrix would be helpful for you all, I would love to connect with you one-on-one and see what we can do to support your organization. So at this point, what I'm able to do is I'd like to kind of open up the floor for a discussion. If any of you would like to kind of dump into the chat box, either any of your questions that you might have, or I would love to hear your responses to some of these questions that I have here on the screen. So for those of you in the webinar today, I'd like to ask, how do you think Priority Matrix will support your small business? Or what systems is your team currently using for task management? These are questions that I have for you all, but I would also be open to hearing your questions and answering those for you today. While we wait for those responses, I want to point out that next week I'm hosting several additional webinars. And number one, I would love to hear your feedback on which topics would be helpful for your small business. And number two, in my follow-up email, I'm going to provide a link to register for those webinars. So be sure to check them out, register for them. And even if you can't attend, I'm going to send you a follow-up email with the recorded webinar to watch at your convenience. Looks like we have somebody typing here, so I'm going to hang tight for a couple more minutes. Don't be shy, definitely speak up. I would love to hear your thoughts on kind of this webinar and additional topics I can cover to help you. If there are no other questions and nothing else comes up here, what we can do is I can kind of wrap up this webinar. But Rez, I do see your question, which is, could you address the integration of Outlook and tasks to Priority Matrix? Yes, I would absolutely love to do this. So what we can do, if I'm able to exit out of my presentation, I'm going to pull up my Outlook here. And Priority Matrix is absolutely very heavily used for the email management aspect of, kind of task prioritization. So the way that this is going to work for you all is you're able to install the integration to Outlook. And essentially what happens is from here, you're able to grab an email. You can prioritize it into your priority matrix. So let's find one of the projects that we were working on. Let's go with the IT. Well, let's go back here and we'll put it in manage login credentials for employees, just so we can kind of actively, find where we're putting this email. Prioritize it into the correct project, the correct quadrant, and you can pick your due date. If you needed to, right off the bat, this is really common for executive assistants or shared inboxes. You could actually delegate this email to somebody else on your team if right away you wanted to get their attention. When we hit create action item, you get a little preview of this task where indeed you can continue to provide updates if needed. Maybe I want to say invite Bella. Now I can add her as a follower. And if I click away from this email and then come back to it, this task will still be here for me. So you can essentially work 100% through Outlook for a little bit of time if you need to. When we go back to Teams and I open up the project where I put this email, here it is. It's now prioritized. What's great about it, again, is I have my deadline set. So even if I totally space out and forget about this email, it's going to be there for me. And Priority Matrix will, in fact, remind me that I need to get it done. What's really cool about getting your emails prioritized is when you work in views such as your agenda view, which Priority Matrix will show you tasks that you have due based off of the day of the week. Not only will it be tasks or priorities, but you're also able to see those emails that you need to circle back to and handle for that day as well. The second follow-up question was, if I move the email to an archive folder, will Microsoft still be able to, or will Priority Matrix still be able to link to the message? So the answer to that is actually going to be no. And I might have to double check on that for you, but if I were to move this email in Outlook away from my inbox, this task will still be here in Priority Matrix, but the link on the right-hand side that typically would take me back to that email to handle it, this link will not work for you. So, I definitely get that feedback a lot, but the idea is once you're prioritizing your emails into Microsoft Teams, you no longer need to move them so frequently to different folders in Outlook. So I hope that answers your question. Let me know if you have any follow-ups about that. Rez, thank you so much for those questions. Those I'm sure were beneficial to a lot of people on the meeting today. All right. Well, thank you all for your time today. I can't thank you enough for stepping aside from your busy day today and taking some time to meet with me. I'm going to send you all a follow-up email